Well, folks, once again, welcome back to my YouTube channel, Captain Boat Builder. And again, as you can see, I'm quite comfortable down here in my little basement boatyard. Today's episode is number 12, and I'm calling this one Installing the Flotation Tank Side Panels. You'll see as we go through this episode the tremendous amount of work that's required to install 2 pieces of wood. Yes, that's it. Only 2 pieces of wood get installed in this episode. But they're very important, both cosmetically and structurally. You'll see why fitting these pieces was difficult. Getting them to look exactly as perfect as possible. The curve of the panels, the fit around the edges. It took a lot of time. So I hope that this will help you a little bit. And again, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Here I'm beginning to work on shaping the panels for the sides of the flotation tanks. You can see I've got them clamped in position on the carlins, and I've been slowly cutting and trimming along the bottom edge. It's hard to get them in place. It's hard to get them even. It just takes a lot of time sanding a little 1/4 inch here, 1/4 inch there, looking for a nice smooth curve. You may notice that I've got a centerline string back in place. It really helps to guide your eye to see if it looks like the panel on one side is pretty much the same as the panel on the other side. You're trying to get the curve the same on both sides, whether it's the curve of the panel itself or the edges. I did find that by carefully fitting one, I could use that flipped over as a guide, at least a starting point for the other side. And assuming that your boat is pretty uniform, pretty straight, no twist, I think you'll find that the one panel will serve as an excellent guide for the other side. Save you a little time on the cutting. This is the position that I've chosen for the access panel to the flotation tank. You can see it's up near the bow. It's pretty much, I've got one on each side, pretty much on both sides of the centerboard trunk, the daggerboard trunk. These are the types of access panels that I've decided to use. You can get these relatively cheaply from Amazon. They come in lots of different sizes. This one has an outside diameter of about 5 inches. It seems to be a good size. You can get your hand in there. And just as a reminder, in the plans, Michael said it's pretty good. It's a pretty good idea to put the access hatches either forward or aft on the flotation tanks, because if there's any water, it's going to accumulate in the ends, not so much in the middle. Anyhow, I'll be cutting the hole and mounting these things, and starting to work on preparing the panels with coats of epoxy paint on the side that you can see, and on the back side it'll be coats of epoxy with fiberglass tape sections reinforcing the panel. Just wanted to briefly show you the panels for the sides of the flotation tanks. That's what I'm working on now. You can see we've got one is the inside, one is the outside. This is the way I decided to put the fiberglass tape on the inside. This is an inside panel. This is for reinforcement, just so, as Michael says, you don't wind up putting your foot through the side of the tank or your heel. The top piece here, that's the outside. It's going to get 3 coats of resin with sanding, then primer, then multiple coats of white paint. On the inside, and you may notice on both of them, you'll see the areas of exposed wood. I covered that up with tape before I put the resin on. These are the areas that are going to be bonded. They're going to be bonded to the boat. You can see the vertical sections. That's where the panels are going to be bonded to the edges of the webs, also bonded to the hull, and bonded to the insides of the carlins. So wherever you're going to have contact, just be sure that you've taped it off so you've got contact with bare wood, you'll get a much better bond with the resin. And if you don't do that, just be sure that the area that you're going to bond is well sanded before you start using the epoxy. I just wanted to show you one thing that I've done to try and check for the straightness, if you want to use that word, straightness of the boat, the absence of twist and stuff. I hope you can see this. Its lines are fairly small. You can see here that I've got a yellow string here. I've got a yellow string down low. This one at the top runs from the peak of the bow all the way back to the center of the transom. This one here runs on the center line down low in the boat. And I'll try to get the camera just right here. You can see how the strings just overlap. See, as I go back and forth, you can see that they're perfectly straight. Also, I've run strings from this corner, the end of the carlin, the forward end of the carlin, all the way to the back, and I've run it on the other side, on this side, from the forward end of the carlin all the way to the back. I've also run strings down here from this corner, which is where the side pieces for the flotation tanks will meet the hull. Got those on both sides, and they run low along the hull right here, and they run all the way to the back corner. And so with all of these strings, I'm able to measure from the inside of the hull straight across to this string. On this side, I can take this measurement. I can do the same thing on the other side. I can do these athwart ships, as they say, athwart ship measurements at any point in the hull, again, to check the alignment. Also, you can see, especially from the strings on the top, they almost look like the string that's stretched on a bow, especially on this one. And you can take measurements there. It's an easy way to get your eye lined up to make sure that your boat is about as straight as it can possibly be, especially the fore and aft string, or I should say, the string that runs the whole length of the boat. You can see it's just about right. And it's also a way to check again for the center line of the boat as close as possible to be sure that when you set the trunk for the dagger board, the support system, the bracing system for the mast step, and the mast step itself, you can get that perfectly in the center of the boat, and also the hole in the deck right here. You have a good reference for the position of the mast. So these strings, as goofy as this looks, these strings have actually helped me a lot to check all the dimensions on the boat to make sure that it is straight. I also wanted to mention that, of course, at this point in the construction, if in fact I found something was off, there's not a whole lot you can do about it. Changing the dimensions at this point in the construction is quite difficult. But I am pleased that using these strings and checking as carefully as I can, I'm finding that almost all of the measurements that I took are literally within 2, sometimes 3 millimeters of each other. So the tolerances have been quite close, and I'm quite pleased with the result. I'm finally ready to glue on the sides to the flotation tanks. This is the panel for the port side. You're looking at the port side of the boat now. This is the top. This is actually going to be flipped up like this with the paint on the inside of the boat. But this is the top. So what we have here is this mark is this approximate line. It's the inside of the carlin, which is slightly higher than the outside of the carlin. So I'm going to cut with the saber saw about 1/4 of an inch from this line, so that when the panel is installed, I'll still have about 1/4 of an inch of material sticking up above the top edge of the carlin, the inboard edge, which is right here. And that'll be trimmed so that it's flush with the top of the carlin. Before I get ready to glue these things on, the areas here that you can see that are raw wood, I'm going to put on 1 coat of epoxy, and I'm going to allow it to penetrate for maybe 10-15 minutes. That'll help with the bond. I'm also going to put a coat of epoxy on this part of the carlin where the epoxy and wood flour mixture will be used to glue the side pieces. I'm going to allow that to sink in. Then I'm going to put a little epoxy here and down here, and I'm going to let all that sort of sink in. Then I'm going to be putting a bead of the wood flour and epoxy mixture on all these areas that you see now that are raw wood. And that's where the bonding is going to be. And I'm going to be putting that same bead of wood flour and epoxy on the inside of the carlins and on the vertical parts of the web. All of the webs in the bulkhead. So that'll be the preparation for gluing these things finally in place. At last, the side panels on the flotation tanks are glued in place. This is another operation you can see that requires, at least for me, it required a lot of clamps. I'm pretty happy with the fit. Things look nice and uniform. And so now I'm in the cleanup phase. Well, folks, now I'm finally done with the side panels for the flotation tanks. I'm quite pleased with the way they turned out, especially with the pre-finishing. I've got a very, very slick white paint surface. Again, this is 3 coats of epoxy sanded in between each coat and 3 coats of finish single part polyurethane. Very nice surface. I'm also finished here on the tops of the carlins. I'm finished, I used a small plane, finished with the surfacing of the top edge of the side tank pieces. And I'm completely set up now for the deck to lay into this groove and across here at just the right angle. That has also worked out quite well. And in closing, I'd like to show you one more thing that I've done, and this is, again, slightly different than what Michael recommends, and I'll explain to you why I'm doing it. If you notice the fillet that I've got at the bottom of the side panels for the flotation tanks where they meet the pieces of the hull, you'll notice that the filleting is quite small. I did that on purpose because, as you may be able to see here, this is the other side, I have an unusually smooth finish. This is just going to take a little bit of sanding, and it'll be a seam that you'll hardly see at all. On this particular joint, Michael recommends the filleting and fiberglass tape, and I decided not to use the fiberglass tape because I can get a smoother finish this way. There will be some reduction in the strength, and I'm hoping to make that up by using extra filleting material inside the tank. This is the back side of the same seam. I haven't done it yet, but I'll be putting more filleting material in here than probably was recommended. So I'm hoping to pick up the strength on the inside of the tank. So I hope you've enjoyed this little segment. Bear in mind that I've only installed 2 pieces of wood, and it's taken me a tremendous amount of time. They're very important structural pieces. I'm pleased with the finish, and just like everything else, it just takes time. I hope you've enjoyed the episode. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you again soon. So long.